Now, how many of you at some point in today said how grateful you were at least once to your spouse for something? How many of you did that? Okay, good. Now, those of you who didn't, you need to say something grateful right now. Harvard University actually did a study and found out that the number of thankfulnesses that you need to give to another person so that it overcomes your negativity at times is 5 to 1. 5 gratefulnesses, 5 thank yous, 5 appreciations to every 1 negative statement. So go and tell somebody something right now. I thank you so much for this. I thank you for that. Just tell your spouse something that you're grateful for about them. Go. Okay, we know what John is saying, but okay. Good, yeah, go ahead, talk. This is good, this is good. Now, while you're doing that, let me just also say, one of the things that I'm very excited about, they're going to be handing you the notes for this evening, and you can look at that, is we give out through our ministry a daily devotional that comes out of the book of Proverbs called Breakfast with Solomon. And so I give you a different verse from the proverb from that day every day for 3.5 years. And you go through every single book of the book of Proverbs in 3.5 years. And if you'd be interested in just being signed up to get a free, here's an email devotion, you can just sign up on this little thing, and we would be happy to send that to you. So I'm just going to hand this, and feel free to let it go by, or feel free to sign up if you want to. Okay? Thank you. Now, if you have your Bibles, we are going to be in a verse of Scripture that is familiar to many of you, Psalms 139, verses 13 through 16. I want to read it out of the New International Version, and just if you want to look it up there, Psalms 139, verses 13 through 16, we are going to explore more about that verse than you ever thought possible this evening. David, writing under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit and recorded 3,000 years ago in this song, said, "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. When I count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I am still with you." Your spouse who you are sitting next to, that verse is completely true of him or her. God was at work knitting them together with just the size they have, with just the personality they have, with just the traits that they have, just the very thing that irritate the snot out of you. And what you have to embrace is that God celebrated when they made this person, when he knit this person together and gave them this parentage, and so he wanted them to be like that. Now, some of the rough edges knocked off, but he wanted that person to be just like that. And you have to embrace an idea that says, I have to adapt and learn to celebrate the uniqueness of this person rather than fight it because it's different than me. That's what we want to talk about tonight. Now we're going to do a little bit of review if you want to take notes and that kind of stuff. So let's walk our way through this whole process. And there are how many problems in marriage? 5 problems. So you guys are already experts. You can be fixing everybody's marriage. There's only 5 problems, okay? And problem number 1, problem number 2, problem number 3, problem number 4, problem number 5. We're going to talk about problem number 3 tonight, but let's do a little bit of review, okay? What does it mean to love biblically another person? Okay, you can cheat. It's up there. Okay, it means to meet needs. It means to pursue their soul. And it means to please, even if you don't feel like it. Because there are times when you don't. Okay? Then we talked about ignoring needs, that wives have needs and husbands have needs. And let me help you understand. When I, as a man, am meeting my wife's needs, I am a husband. Okay? That is one of 10 roles I have to play. Okay? I'm also a Christian. I'm a worker. I'm a citizen. I'm an individual. I'm a lot of different things. But one of the roles I have to play, and if I want a great marriage, then I have to be a husband to my wife. Now, most of the time, my natural orientation is to just be a man to my wife. And that doesn't help. I need to be a husbandman. Now, on the other side, a wife is not just a woman who's married. A wife is someone who ministers to the needs, the relational needs of her husband, so that he blossoms and flourishes. It's only one of 10 roles that a woman plays. Now, and she plays citizen and Christian and individual and worker and all these other things and mother. But this role is significant because she can really determine whether her husband blooms or dies. Okay? So we wanted to just cover that process. Now, what we looked at in that whole process, these are the needs, and I hope you talked about them. How many of you had fascinating discussions about these various things? And a few of you, okay, the rest of you just napped. Okay, so let's go on. Now, then the second column that we looked at, well, actually we didn't get a chance to look at it because there's just not enough time, is immature behaviors. There's 3 kinds of immaturity that all of us are guilty of, and I just want to cover this brief because this is a whole hour-and-a-half lecture. But the 3 kinds are thoughtless immaturity, intentional immaturity, and destructive immaturity. And I love this when I get into counseling and I ask couples, I say, how many of you have been thoughtless? You know, where you didn't call before you got home, or you forgot a birthday and you just thought you left your underwear on the floor or whatever, you thoughtlessly. And everybody's guilty of it. Everyone is guilty of thoughtless immaturity. Intentional immaturity is rather than say to your spouse, I sense that there's some difficulty. Can we talk? This is where we burn toast, where we stay late at the office, we play more golf, we do other things, and we try and send a message with sarcasm, and we try and get them to understand we're mad instead of having a direct conversation. The third kind of immaturity is destructive immaturity. This is where if you do it once, it might destroy the marriage. An affair, robbing a bank, running drugs across the Mexican border. I've had all of those. Okay? I had one guy who was paying his mortgage by selling cocaine out of LAX. And it was causing problems in his marriage. It was very difficult because the mortgage was not, consistent. Just amazing. It could be that you were addicted to something. It could be all kinds of different things where you have a destructive immaturity going on. And I've had to say to people, I can't fix your marriage until we get rid of the cocaine addiction, until we get rid of the alcohol, until you stop sleeping with all the ladies in your office. Okay? So, I have this book over there called Mission Possible, Winning the Battle Against Temptation. And it grew out of a relationship that I had with this one guy. We had this, a number of guys who were struggling with lust and pornography. And this one lady brought her husband to my office, and she pushed open my office door and she threw her husband in. She was bigger than him, and she threw him in and she said, fix him. And really the implication was, or I will. Because when he would go to bed at night, he would speak out the names of the women he was having affairs with in his sleep, and it was causing problems in their marriage. What we discovered was that he had been exposed to pornography as a young person, and he got very good at drawing women into sexual relationships with him, and that was what he did. What we discovered is that when he began to apply the Bible to his mind and to what he lived out, his whole demeanor changed. And thankfully, by her graciousness, because she didn't have to, The marriage was saved. They're still together. God's moving forward. And he says, as long as I do what you taught me, and we walked through 42 different lessons from the scriptures, how to clear his mind of the impurity in his head, he said, I'm great, and I can continue to have a great marriage. So that's destructive immaturity, okay? Now, let's go on. These are the antidotes to that, but that's on the book, and we don't have time to talk about that. Okay, now, so let's talk about the third one. Clashing temperaments. Remember I said opposites attract until you're married. And then they can't figure out why you're so weird and why you're so different. But when you were dating, it's like, oh, she's so different. It's so fascinating. She likes to talk about this, and she likes to do this, and all that kind of stuff. Now, we're going to talk about that as we go through this thing here. Psalms 139, 13 through 18, and Proverbs 30, 11 through 14. It talks about the differences and different things in people. I'm going to help you explore how different your spouse is. And your homework is going to be to try and talk about this. Are you like this? Are you like that? Now, I know as soon as I start doing this, you're going to go, that's you. And you're going to want to talk right now. And I love that, but I'm going to want you to talk about it a little bit, but still listen to me. And then tonight, you're going to go, wow, let's talk about how you're this and how you're that, okay? So here's what we want to talk about. God has put you together like puzzle pieces, and you fit in a certain way. Now, you may not fit like any other couple you know. And that's fine. That's good. I know there's a number of couples, and if you go to church a lot, oftentimes church says couples have to be a certain way. And that's not necessarily true. Couples need to be the unique relational stretch that they are, okay? As long as they love each other and as long as they move forward. Now, did I do that again? Was that me? Okay, hit that again. Oh, there we go. There are 4 levels that I want you to grow through over the course of your marriage. Now, it might be tonight. It might be over the next 5 years or 10 years. You want to go from ignorance, I thought everyone was just like me, to understanding, wow, people are different. That's where I want you minimum to go tonight. Wow, people are really different. Now, please don't say the word different like it's really the word strange. Wow, people are really different. Different is not bad. It's good, okay? And then level 3, acceptance. It's okay for you to be different. It's okay. One of the reasons I was telling some folks at dinner tonight, one of the reasons my wife almost didn't marry me was I was louder than anyone she had ever met in her life. And so it was shocking. And she said to her father, she said, Dad, I kind of like him, but he dresses funny, and he's so skinny, which is not true anymore. She fixed that. And he's so loud. One of the dates I took her on was to SeaWorld, and our first few dates. And we were sitting on the back row of SeaWorld in the walrus container, and I was louder than the walruses. I was louder than the guy with the microphone, and I was louder than everyone else in the whole SeaWorld enclosure. And she's just shrinking as I'm going, whoa, that was great! And I'm louder than everyone. And so she had to kind of walk that through, and she had to work with, okay, I can maybe accept this, and that kind of thing. Now, and then level 4, celebration. They're different in ways that are phenomenal, and we need to celebrate it. God gave you that for a reason, okay? And we're already losing one guy just because he can't handle it. Sorry, no, so good. Okay, sorry, good. Now, so let's go on. Now, here's what I typically will help a couple walk through. I'll help them walk through male-female differences, Myers-Briggs differences, DISC test differences, or the ancient temperaments, love language differences, spiritual gifts differences, natural abilities, and eye memory patterns. Now, there's a lot more. Jane mentioned tonight there was one, and I'm blanking right now, but she was even mentioning one that's another way that you can measure different people. Now, and what I want you to understand is God has unique ways to work with you. I think I'm going to blow your mind with some of this stuff tonight. It's absolutely wonderful. And it really grows out of this Psalms 139 passage where we're just now scientifically beginning to understand, whoa, you're really different. The male or female differences blew my mind. I was doing some research for this book, Marital Intelligence, that we're basing this on, and I found a number of books in which they've been doing studies for the last 40 years on the differences between boys and girls, especially in adolescence. And they've done MRI imaging and various other things, and they've discovered how radically different boys and girls are and how it goes into adulthood. Let me give you some of the conclusions. Let me just give you some of them, okay? So, male-female differences adapted from the book Why Gender Matters. If you're still raising kids, you got to get this book. It's really good. Not everything I agree with, but it's really, really helpful, okay? Now, these are, let me just walk you through. Hearing. They know scientifically that every woman hears between 7 to 20 times better than every man. That her hearing is more acute, easy, unless it's been damaged in some way. But generally what they've discovered that boys and girls, men and women, all women hear between 7 to 20 times better than all men. That's why I have 4 girls in my home. They say, why do you have to turn the TV up so loud? And I'm saying, so I can hear it. They have it down at 3 and they can hear dialogue. And I got it at 30 and I can hear. Now what's interesting is they are also finding interesting things that many young boys are being diagnosed with ADD who are sitting in a classroom in the 4th row or further back, and they have a female teacher. And they're acting up because the boy can't hear and all of the girls in the class can. And there's some very interesting implications along that line, okay? Now, then let's talk about eyes. Did you know that every man's eyeballs are thicker than every woman's eyeballs? I didn't know that, the back of their eyeballs. And every men and women have rods and cones in their eyes. Rods are motion detectors, and they pick up motion. Cones are fine light receptors, usually in the center of the eye. The rod cells, the cells that pick up the motion, they are thicker, and the cones are thinner. Now, what they've discovered is that all men have more rods. And men's eyes are tuned to large muscle movement, large things going. That's why a football being thrown, a guy just thought, his rods just pick it up. Now, the way they tested this, fascinatingly enough, is if you take a 5-year-old boy and a 5-year-old girl, and you give them a full box of crayons, absolutely no, and you just say, draw whatever you want, sweetie, draw whatever you want, son, draw anything you want. If you give a blank sheet of paper and a full box of crayons to a girl, she will always draw a flower or a person. It will usually be in a red, orange, or green, and it'll always have a face, because cones focus on the face, and cones prefer red, orange, green, and some primary colors. If you give a same box of crayons to a boy who's 5 years old and say, draw anything you want, he will always draw a race car, a rocket ship, or someone running, and it will always be silver, black, blue, or gray. Why? Because that's what rods prefer. And so what you have is you're following your own eye patterns, okay? I find that absolutely fascinating. That's why guys can watch football and where there's no faces for hours, and women are saying, I don't know any of these people. Who are the people? I want to see their face. That's why, by the way, when you're talking with a woman, you're talking, and she can notice the eyebrow raised because her cone picked that up. And she said, what does that mean? Talk to me about it. I think you're upset deep in your soul. No, I don't even know. And he's looking at your face, and as long as your head doesn't move, it's fine. It's just a big thing. Okay, you're there, you're pretty, I like you. Okay, now, and it's totally different. And the cones are very focused. Now, let's keep going. You're not listening fast enough. They found that men and women navigate their world in different places. Men, when you ask them a navigational question, they resource in their brain, in a very center part of their brain, and it's very absolute. 30 degrees right, 30 degrees left, north, south, east, west. Women, however, they access a different part of their brain, and it says, oh, it's just down there by the cute store with the little overhang, and then it's past the picket fence, and then you take a left. And when they access how to get directions, let me tell you, neither one's right and neither one's wrong. It's their brain goes to different sections of the brain, okay? Now, I find this next one fascinating, and it's the answer to why, ladies, your husband won't talk to you. This is a big one. All children up to the age of 7 store negative emotions. If their parents fight, if there's going to be a divorce, if they're wounded or hurt, they store it in the center part of their brain that has maybe 1, maybe 2 neural connections out. It's almost hidden in the center of their brain, okay? In the amygdala. At 7 years of age, where your negative emotions are stored starts to move. And they've watched this on MRIs. It starts to move from the amygdala, and by the time you're 17, you store your negative emotions in your prefrontal cortex, right in the front of your brain, over your speech patterns, where your speech center is, but only for girls. Girls' storage of negative and positive emotions moves at the age of 7. At the age of 17, as soon as she feels an emotion, she can immediately talk about it because it's very close to her speech center. The man's emotions are still in the amygdala. And I didn't feel anything. I don't even know how to talk about it, even if I did. And he can't get it out because it doesn't have very many neural connections out. And when it does come out neurally through the nerve center, that nerve center doesn't go through the speech center for him. In fact, they've done enough interesting things that men go, I'm feeling something, but I can't put words to it because it doesn't go through the prefrontal cortex where your speech is formed. That's why I've had so many men go, I don't even know. And she climbs up, he won't talk to me. And the wife is like, I felt this, I felt that, I felt this. And he's thinking, she's got a bazillion emotions. Just like what you saw from Tim, she's texting all this stuff because she's feeling it and she's able to verbalize it. And he's, I hate, I love, I want food. It's very under-resourced in its ability to communicate. And so it's totally different. I just find that fascinating. Now let's go on. Then sexuality, one is related to releasing, and John knows all about that, so you can just talk with John. Okay. Then physical violence. Interestingly enough, they've discovered that boys and girls, even at the youngest ages, boys source when they see or experience physical violence, it goes through a different pathway in their bodies than it does for girls, in which boys find it okay and sex sometimes cool, and girls are not cool with it. And it just goes through a different path in their body. And then stress response, I have 3 girls. And as they were growing up, they were on swim team and they were on soccer and they were doing all these sports. What they've discovered is when a boy is under stress, a stress test at school, or he's going to be in a competition, or he's going to be running or swimming or football, his body releases a hormone called adrenaline, in which he gets stronger, smarter, faster. Under exactly the same stress, the test, the football, the swimming, a woman releases acetylcholine, not adrenaline. And acetylcholine does the opposite of what adrenaline does. Acetylcholine causes your stomach to be nauseous. It causes you to want to kick off your shoes. It causes you to kind of just want to waz back. Every one of my girls, right before their big races in swimming, and they were championship swimmers, they would say, Dad, I don't feel good. I don't think I'm going to be able to. I said, it's just the acetylcholine. Get in there and just kill them. You know, and they would say, Dad, even when I'm underwater, I can hear you cheering. You know, kind of thing. But what's interesting is now that's why, interestingly enough, when they do SAT tests and ACT tests, boys test smarter than they actually are, and girls test less smart than they actually are because of the presence of acetylcholine versus adrenaline. And so, I've had to walk my girls through all the college entrance stuff. You're brilliant, you got these grades, you're wonderful, you're gonna do fine. Every one of my girls has went in to college going, oh, they don't think I'm very smart, and then they get A's, all A's and everything, because they get past the acetylcholine of the timed test. It's a very fascinating study. Then risk-averse, risk-seeking. Boys are risk-seeking. Girls tend to be risk-averse. They've actually found that amongst men and boys, when we get stabbed or hurt or we have pain, the pain nerves route through a pleasure center. So guys actually kind of go, that was cool, let's do that again. That's why they like football and pow, and oh, that was good. And girls, their nerve pain receptors are not routed through any kind of pleasure receptor. And ladies, that's why your husbands seem insane sometimes. When they're too old to play football, they still play it at Thanksgiving, and then they can't walk for a week and all that kind of stuff. Now, then nurture, aggression, friendship. When ladies make friends, they make friends face to face. Because their cones in their eyes want to connect and they want to grow and tell me about your feelings and tell me about how you're doing. And so they make friends, and they don't really even consider them friends until they know enough about you and we share our feelings and our thoughts, and that's great. Guys, we make friends by being side by side so that we can see the ducks fly and the golf balls fly and the footballs fly, and they go, you're married? Fascinating. And we don't even care. Because we are shoulder to shoulder, and we have a friendship, a golf friendship. We have a church friendship. We have some kind of friendship that's out there about this. And if it gets too syrupy about your problems, okay, I guess this is church, but kind of weird, and I hope that you do better. Buck up. And we really don't know how to deal with it. And so it's just different, okay? Unless you're a pastor and brilliant and spiritual like John. Okay, now, is any of this new to you? I hope you talk about this and work with it. Okay, good. Now, let's go on. Okay, Myers-Briggs Temperament Sorter. This has been very big, very helpful. And let me just suggest, I think there's some truth in here. It's not all true, but some very interesting observations, okay? This is based upon 4 scales, from E to I, from S to N, from T to F, from J to P. Now, those stand for extrovert to introvert, from sensate to intuitive, from feeler to thinker, and from judger to perceiver. Now, let me tell you what those really mean by some of the things I think we've put in your notes there, okay? These are slides that I've pulled out and edited a little bit out of a fascinating book called Do What You Are. Extroverts, I'm not going to read all those, but extroverts, they get energy from other people. And the more they're around other people, the more energy they get. And so it's like people are a battery for them. It's like, oh. That's why my friend, who's a super extrovert, the longer he's with people, the more he winds up. Ooh, I love it. Introverts, they get energy from silence and quiet and peace. And almost from the air in a silent library, they get energized. And those two always find each other to marry each other. Always. And you have to think through, because see, many of you who are extroverts, you think, let's go to another party. And the introvert's going, let's stay away from people. Let's put the kids down at 6:30, and let's just have a quiet night. Okay? So you may be one or your spouse may be the other. Okay? You have to figure that out. Then sensors versus intuitives. The sensate people, these are, I think it would be better if you would have called them concrete people. They like things that are. My wife is a super S. She likes tables and chairs and written contracts and discussions of things that are real. When I talk to her about abstract things, she says, who are we talking about? I don't want to talk about justice and mercy. Who? What? She needs to deal with real things. I, on the other hand, I like to deal with intuitives, reading between the lines. And what do you think they really meant? And what do you think about this? And what do you think about how the government's going to go in this direction? I love that. And my wife is, who are we talking about? And what are we really dealing with? And both are right and both are needed in different situations. Does that make sense? And so you can talk about those kind of things and how you get energy and how you perceive the world. This last week, I was working on my car, and it's very difficult for an intuitive to work on an actual physical car because it's messy, greasy, and it doesn't do what you want. And it's not mentally manipulatable. And it's like, oh, and then this bolt doesn't go, and then you jam it. That's for the sensates. Okay, now let's go on. Thinkers versus feelers. Some of you are thinkers. Now, it doesn't mean that feelers don't think, okay? Now, let me just also tell you, this particular dimension of personality is the only one, it's the only one that research has found that has a male-female difference. About 70% of the people that they've studied who are thinkers are men, and about 70% of the women are feelers. But that means that 30% of the women are thinkers and 30% of the men are feelers. Now let me tell you what those are. Thinkers are people who are pretty much just the facts, ma'am. Let's just get to the bottom line. Let's just, okay, and when they're gonna make a decision, they distance themselves from any personal contact and they say, what's right? It's just right, we just gotta kill the dog. That's the deal. Okay, the dog's gotta be put to sleep. Okay, you just got to be fired. And they prefer to distance themselves to do that. I had a friend of mine who was a police officer, great police officer, and he would just say, okay, you got to be arrested. The dog's got to go down. And feelers have a horrible time taking the dog to the vet to be put down. They just can't do it. And they have a horrible time firing people and all that kind of stuff. Does that make sense? Feelers, on the other hand, they have a sense of how everyone will react to what's happening. Aunt Mabel is coming, and she gave us a picture. And if we don't have it hanging in the hallway, then she won't think that we love her. And her husband, the thinker, says, that's Aunt Mabel's problem. That's not my problem. She needs to grow up. And the feeler is saying, but why would we hurt her? Now, let me help you understand. If you're in a political environment, and not to suggest that church is ever political, the feeler can tell you what's happening. That person's offended. This person, and the thinker's going, but this is right. This is what the Bible says. Let's just, and the feeler's saying, if you do it that way, we're going to have a big mess. Usually what happens is the thinker acts, and then the feeler tells them why it's a big mess. And my wife is an extreme feeler. She just senses and works with it. I'm trying to grow in that direction. I'm kind of like Joe Friday on the Dragnet series. Just the facts, ma'am. Okay, just shut up, tell me who died and what, and let's just go get the perpetrator. And you just, now what you have to do is, when you look at those things, the discussion about them comes from totally different places. When my wife wants to make a decision, she wants to pull into it and think, what will you think about it? And what will you feel about it? And what will you think about it? And what will you think? And I'm thinking, I don't care. If you got a problem with it, you need to grow up. And I back away. She moves in. And what I've had to learn is to say, honey, I want you to do your thing, and then give me the facts of feelings. Then I'll bear the responsibility of interpreting it. And sometimes we have to go your way because, yeah, that's right. Or sometimes we just have to. This make sense? Okay, let's go on. You can look at the rest of those things. There's a lot more to it. I'm giving you the summary, okay? Judgers versus perceivers. Now, I think these are really bad labels. Really what it is is closure versus process. So if you want to write those in, it's closure versus process. Now, a judger, a person who is a closure person, they would rather make 3 or 4 decisions than make no decision. They need some closure. They want to know what's going to happen. And this has no male, female, it's just random, but it's just, I got to know. My wife is a radical closure person. She needs to know what we're doing, where we're going, how we're going to accomplish it. On the other side are the people who are the perceivers, and they just want to shoot from the hip. They want to see what happens. They want to keep their options open. Every time we make a decision, it closes down some of the options, some of the possibilities. And I don't know that I really like that. I like to keep it. Sometimes, if you're an extreme perceiver or processor, you won't make a decision because it will close down an option, and you'll let the fact that you didn't make a decision make the decision for you. You'll put it off. Now, when my wife and I go on vacation, when we first started getting married, my idea of a great vacation is throw a few things in the back of the car and just let's see where the car goes. That is not my wife's idea of a great vacation, because that's how we ended up one night after we had visited Crater Lake that we didn't know we were going to visit. But it was wonderful, it was beautiful, and we're coming down, and I'll say, well, just get a motel. So we come down to Eugene, Oregon, in the middle of the summer in Oregon, and we discover every single room in the whole city had been rented. And so we chased rooms that, well, we think this one still has, so we'd go over there. Nope, go over here. We found one room at the No-Tell Motel that was rented hourly with water beds, lava lamps, and mirrors on the ceiling. She is so gracious, she never brings that up. But I have a picture of me, not her, standing in front of the No-Tell, because that's the only place to stay. So we had to stay there because I was processing, and it was just so spontaneous. So now, do you know what we do? A year before we go on vacation, my wife says, where would you like to go? And I'll throw out Boston, or I'll throw out Disney World, like we did this last January. And she'll say, great. And that's the last I hear of it. And she is on every website and everything. And so when she says, let's get on the plane. I say, great. Where are we going? Disney World? Fantastic. She's got every minute of 3 weeks planned. And it then appears, and she says, we're going to this. I say, wonderful. How spontaneous. She's got it all down. It appears spontaneous to me because I don't know. Now, if she ever has a question, she'll say, which would you prefer, this or this? And I'll say, I prefer that. And so she'll build it in, and it's amazing. We get a fascinating activity in the morning, a fascinating activity in the afternoon, a fascinating activity in the evening, and I don't know what they are. And I love it, and she loves it, because she's got these lists and pages, and she's researched. She's got books, and it's just amazing. And so she gets the closure she needs, and I get the spontaneity I need because I just need to be stupid on this thing. Now, so you have to work it out how it works. Now, for most of you, that wouldn't work, but for us, it's just great. Now, let's go on. Spiritual gifts. If you are a Christian, God, the Holy Spirit, has given you a spiritual gift. And the more Christian you become, the more... Now, let me just say, isn't it possible, isn't it true that some people become Christians, but they don't let themselves become too Christian? They don't really grow, work out their own salvation. And my hope is that you would. But the more Christian you become, the more your spiritual gift begins to try and move out of you. And there's all kinds of spiritual gifts. What you have to understand, nobody ever believes me, but before I was a Christian, I was an extreme introvert. And I was thinking of studying to be a pharmacist because I was very introverted. And then I asked Jesus to come into my heart, and he gives me this spiritual gift called exhortation, in which I want to talk and exhort people, and I can't shut up. And it's like the people who knew me in high school go, who are you? I think you're in Gil's body, although it's a lot older than it was. But but you're totally different because you are radically different. Now, so what happens is, the more you discover your spiritual gift, what I found is my spiritual gift has now taken over my whole life. I just exhort everywhere. That's why you don't invite me to a funeral, because I will exhort people at a funeral. Have you ever met people with gifts of mercy? You know, people who just love it, and I don't have a drop of that. I don't have any of that. My sister has gifts of mercy, and my wife has gifts of mercy. I remember I was walking down the street with my sister one day, and we were talking, and she looked across the street at a person we didn't know, a lady we didn't know, and she said, "That woman is hurting." And my first response in my head was, "How did you know?" My second response, being the pastor that I am, "Why do we care?" And the next thing, we're watching this lady that we've never met. She starts bawling. She starts crying. And so what does my sister have to do? My sister has to go over there and comfort her, introduce herself, and, and this is my jerk brother, and she's just caring. Now, when I was a pastor of a small church in the southern Mojave Desert, people in our church would get sick and go to the hospital. And so as a pastor, you have to visit people in the hospital. So I would visit them, and my exhortation gift never turns off. So I would say, "What are you in for?" And they say, "Gallstones." "Oh, how do you think that God wants to win the world through your gallstones? Do you want me to move your bed over to this other person so you can witness to them? How do you want to be? Oh, let's rise up your pallet, walk, go, charge." And people would say to me, "Pastor, I'm sick. I don't want to be motivated." One lady, I loved her. She was so great. She was an older German woman, and since Stieglitz is German, she would just say, "Pastor, is there anyone else that can visit me? Because you suck at this. You just are terrible." So what I discovered was I would go back to the church, and I would ask, how many of you have gifts of mercy? People would raise their hands, and then I would train them, motivate them, and send them like an army to the hospitals. And it got so bad because we had all these people who'd been raised up in our church who had mercy gifts. One time there was a real prominent person in our church got sick and in the hospital, so I got to go visit them. So I go into the room, and there were people around the bed, and they went, "Pastor's coming." So they surrounded the bed to not let me get to them because they thought I would do damage. I would exhort this person too much. Now, there you go. Let's put them both up there. Now, these are the lists of spiritual gifts that God might. Whoa, that's just to keep you awake. Now, most of you have at least one gift. You have at least one, but some of you have more. I have exhortation, leadership, and teaching. But you might have any of these. Now, let me just help you understand something. My life as a non-Christian would have been a very, very quiet life. If I had not accepted Jesus Christ as my Savior, if I had not allowed God to develop me as an exhorter, this would not be possible. The chance to meet all you, the chance to write books, the chance to travel the world and encourage people around, my life would be radically different, and I would not be living this blessed life. So one of the things I want to tell you is, if you have not discovered your spiritual gift and begun to develop it, you need to develop it just so you can get to the blessed life. And if your pastor won't let you serve, then go right over his head and talk to his wife and get in and start serving, start embracing, start finding out, what is my spiritual gift? Now, when I was a younger man, the pastor of the church said, "Hey, we don't have anybody to teach the third graders. They're completely unruly. Give them to Gil." So they were completely unruly, and I discovered I didn't have a gift for teaching third graders. Because what I finally did, there was, I think, 5 to 10 of them, and I just put them in push-up position for the whole class. And then if they messed up while they were not listening, I would say, "Okay, give me 5. Because they would always mess up, and then we'd play football at the end of the class. And it was military training. So you're just in push-up position, okay? And the third graders, the parents didn't seem to respond all that well to it. And what I discovered was my teaching gift seems to have more of an adult component. And so you try things out, kind of like Goldilocks. This is too hard. This is too soft. This is just right. Okay, so your wife, your husband has a spiritual gift. And it may come out of them and transform them into someone that's different than the person you married. And it'll be God's creation, and it'll be lovely, even though it'll be different. Okay? Now, let's go on. Okay, the DISC test. How many of you are familiar with the DISC test? A few. This is kind of a workplace test, and it's specific to where you're at. You can take it at work, and you can be totally different at home. Does that make sense? So if you're taking this, you want to think, what am I like at home? What am I like at work? What am I like, in the neighborhood or at church, that kind of thing, because it's more specific. And it has 4 components, D, I, S, and C, okay? Now, the DISC, or the D, stands for dominance. When you are a dominant in one of the areas of your life, something inside of you just says, take command, take over, be in charge. Now, let me help you. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. If God's put that in you, He's put that in you because He wants you to lead. He wants you to do it. And so you just feel, I need to be in charge, okay? Now, and so what happens here is they are driven, choleric, they believe in power. They have strong will. One of my daughters is a strong-willed child. And they're wonderful to raise, except that they have opinions on everything. And they can resist you longer, okay? The interesting thing about strong-willed children, at least in our home, was I was stronger-willed than anything, so we can just win. Now, then they're practical, they're leaders, they're optimistic because they think as long as I'm in charge, it'll be fine. Okay? Then on the negative side, they are hot-tempered, impetuous, they can be cruel. Their idea of wittiness is to be cruel to you. I discovered, as I was growing in my Christian faith, that I cannot be sarcastic because my sarcasm is cruel. I don't mean it to be cruel. I think it's very funny, but you're bleeding when I'm done talking. And so I had to eliminate. I was raised in a very sarcastic home, and I refined that with the Teamsters, and it's not helpful. So I can't do it at all, because it's just, my wife is one of the most witty, gracious people, and she'll just say stuff, and I'll just melt into a puddle of laughter. She's just wonderful. And if I try and do that, she's bleeding. It's just not good. So they are self-sufficient. They can be vengeful. They can be unsympathetic. Kind of, hey, sucks to be you. Okay. And they can just move. And then pride, and they have an inability to admit that they were wrong. That's just where they're at. Okay, now, then the next kind is an influencer, a high I. These are people. They are wonderful, and they are expressive. They are sanguine. They wear orange jackets. They just, they're out there. They want everybody to notice them. They're loud, and they go for it, that kind of thing. They love to be popular, love to be noticed. They enjoy life. If you mix one of these people into anything, life's better. They're wonderful. You can just a regular table, and then you mix one in. Whoa, it's a party. Okay? And they're optimistic. They don't have any idea why they're optimistic. They just always are. And they're friendly. They're compassionate. On the negative side, this kind of person is restless. We're not doing enough fun stuff. They can be weak-willed. They can be pulled in almost any direction. They are impulsive. Let's buy that. Let's do this. Let's go there. Let's buy a trout farm in Montana. Oh, no, let's go do this. And they can just be moving all these. Then they can be undisciplined, undependable, egotistical, emotionally unstable, and they are probably, of all the temperaments, the most temptable. Because that sounds like fun. Let's try it. And before they know it, they can be doing a drug thing, an alcohol thing, an affair thing, a robbing bank thing. And if you have a teenager like this, you really want to help them, okay? But my minor personality now since Jesus has taken over is this. And so we have to work with that. They've got some strengths, got some weaknesses, okay? Now, usually I can tell if you're this by how you dress. Because if you're this, you dress to be noticed. And if you're not this, if you're one of the others, I'm wearing power colors. Then there's a couple of them, I'm wearing to blend in, lots of browns. And you can just see it. Usually when I say that to people always they don't want to talk to me anymore. Okay, no, let's go on. Now, steadiness. These are wonderful people. These are the people that everybody likes. Their particular personality, they're amiable, they get along, they just care for everyone. They're phlegmatic. They want to say, can't we just get along? Can't we be peaceful? They bring peace to every situation. They are witty. My wife is this. In order to put up with my dominance, God sent me this incredible, steady, witty, peaceful person. And they're dependable, they're efficient. Now, when I say efficient, they never go out of their way to do more than they would have to. If you have a teenager like this and you say to them, could you set the table and put the knives on there? When you go out there, only the knives will be there because you said knives. You didn't say placemats, you didn't say forks, you didn't say plates. They're very efficient. By the way, these are the people, they really make good CEOs because they never do anything themselves. They delegate everything. Okay? I had a brother-in-law like this, and he's brilliant. He would tell all of his people, he was high up in his company, he'd say, don't come into my office with a problem unless you have the solution. So when you come in, I want to know what your solutions are. I may give you a different one, but I want to know what yours are because I'm not taking your problem. You're fixing it yourself. And he's total phlegmatic. He's just brilliant. He's just absolutely brilliant. Okay. Now, good-natured, practical, neat. They're just wonderful. Okay. Now, their bad side, the negative side, is they can be slow and lazy. Because why should we put out that much energy? They're just moving slow. And they tease. They're stubborn. Now, the thing about this kind of person, you would never know they're stubborn because they can resist you for years pleasantly. You just feel, oh, they're so with me, and they're not doing anything you're saying. And you just love them, but they have dug in. And I remember one couple that I was working with, and they had a guest room that had not been cleaned out in 15 years. And the husband was a high dominance, and his wife was this, and they hadn't gone into that room for 15 years, and he didn't figure out that she was resisting him. She's brilliant, just brilliant. Now, we had to go in there. Okay, then indecisive, uninvolved. This is the one group that tends to not be self-motivated. Ladies, let me just talk to you. Usually, some of the most desperate marital difficulties come from women who are dominant with husbands who are this. And why is that? Because she's saying, I can't motivate him to do anything. And she says, it's like pushing a chain. How can I follow it? Because he's not going anywhere. And really, usually what has to happen is you have to get that kind of guy into a group of guys so that they can compete, because he will automatically rise to the minimum level of acceptance for whatever group he's in. So if he, get him into a bowling group, a Bible study group, and he will, these guys are trying to love their wives. I can love my wife at least enough to be accepted in this group. And she can lead that. It's fascinating. So now let's go on. Okay. The C, these are the compliant people. These are the perfectionistic people. What they're the best at, their strengths, is that they are analytic, they are melancholy, a little bit moody, but they are the most genius of everyone. They think the big thoughts. These are the Thomas Edisons. These are the Newtons. These are the C.S. Lewis's. Yes. Did I put complaint? Yes. Probably, that was a Freudian slip, okay? So it actually compliance. Sorry, compliant, and I just, okay. They are perfectionistic. If you're like this, that slide bothered you. it's okay. It's all good. It's all good. It's all good. Okay, now, what happens is you don't expect much, you just expect perfection. So if the sexual encounter is not perfect, why would we do it? If you weren't perfect in this week, why would we not do this? And so there is this desire, and usually this person knows what perfection is. One of the funniest stories I ever heard was Florence Littauer, who is an I, was married to her husband, who was a melancholy, or a C, and they're on their honeymoon, and she has a bunch of grapes, and she's throwing grapes in the air, and she's catching them in her mouth. And she's just having a great time, having a loud time. And her husband, who's a melancholy, who's a C, he comes by and he says, would you like to know how to eat those the right way? And she says, I don't think there is a right way. And he says, oh yes, and he grabs the cluster of grapes, and he pulls out of his pocket a fingernail clipper, and he clips off, and he goes through this very perfectionistic way, and you place it in your mouth, and you do this. And they're just married. And she looks at that, and she says, fascinating. She grabs it, she pulls it off. They're just different. They're just totally different. And what you have to understand, one is not right and the other wrong, is that something inside of yourself is making you perform that way. The person who is dominant thinks power. The person who is influencer thinks popularity. How do I get noticed? The person who is a steadiness person, they think, how do I make peace? That comes up in their head. The person who's a compliant, they think, how do we make this perfect? It rises from within them. It's a part of who they are. The negative on this side one is they can be self-centered and subjective. They can be pessimistic, because they wouldn't call it pessimistic. They'd say, I'm realistic. It will go bad, and it's just not going to work out. And often they're right, except for the fact that the optimistic people just do stupid things and make it work, okay? And then they can be critical, because they are right. They have unrealistic expectations. They can be moody. These are the most moody people. They can be in a funk for 3 weeks. I remember I had a pastor friend of mine who was like this, and he could read Hebrew and Greek like we would read the funny pages. He was just brilliant. And he'd go into these depressions, and he'd say, it's like I'd put my favorite jeans on and I'd just be depressed. And I said, I think I have a cure for you. I want you to memorize certain Psalms, and I want you to speak out the Psalms to God in the midst of your depression. And so he did that, and I remember he came to me and he said, it's working. And I said, what's the problem? He said, I'm angry that I can't get depressed because I like being depressed. And I said, aha, that's another problem with a different biblical solution. Okay. So now they can be revengeful. Now, if you ever make a melancholy or a compliant mad at you, they will get you. They will. You won't see it coming, and they will get you. So that's why you want to make peace, you want to work with them, and they need to understand forgiveness and all that kind of thing, and they're a dreamer. Okay, now, ancient temperament disorders, this is pretty much the same. You have this already. It's just divided. Sanguine, it's called, I's are called sanguines, cholerics are called power, melancholies are called perfectionistic, and phlegmatics. You have all those are positive and negatives. You can talk about which is your husband, which is your wife. And understand, without the Holy Spirit, these promptings come up inside. They just do. They just come up, okay? Now, then love languages. How many of you are familiar with love languages? Okay, Jerry, wonderful thing, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time there, but there are 5 kinds of love: acts of service, gift giving, quality time, physical touch and closeness, words of encouragement. What psychologists have discovered is that all of us prefer giving and receiving love in one of these 5 ways more than the others. And so some of you might be acts of service, some of you might be gift giving, some of you might be quality time, some of you might be physical touch and closeness, some of you might be words of encouragement. Now, what often happens is couples who are different, you might be acts of service and he might be words of encouragement. And so he'll try and love you by giving words of encouragement, and you want him to actually do something around the house, okay? And you're trying to love him by doing all these acts of service, and he just wants you to sit down and just have some words of encouragement and respect him and that kind of thing. And so you can miss each other in your love for one another. And this can be very, very, very helpful. But if you've already studied that, then that's great. Let me talk to you about two you probably haven't studied. Your natural abilities. In 1927, General Electric wanted to help their business by studying people and coming up with the natural innate abilities within people. And so they paid a whole bunch of people to study the workers at General Electric in 1927. And they discovered that there were 27 what they called natural abilities. It has nothing to do with the Bible, has nothing to do with spiritual things. It's just you either have this or you don't, and you have either this much of it or that much of it. And they discovered 27 of them, and they've been testing people since 1927 all over the world in these 27 abilities. Now, what they've discovered is that you usually have about 5 of them that are stronger than the other 22. And those 5 cluster around what you will enjoy doing for work and pleasure the most. I've had 2 of my daughters tested in this. It's fascinating. My one daughter, my middle daughter, I don't know what I want to do, Dad. And so we went down when she was 16. We had her tested in San Francisco. And it's not a, what do you like? They actually move things around and they actually test you on stuff. You have to move blocks and you have to move little tweezers and you have to do these 27 different tests. And they came back and they said, you are one of the highest we've tested in almost 100 years in color differentiation. The ability to differentiate this color from that color. You have an incredible ability to move small tools, to move little, small tools. And then they said a few other things, and they said, you will either make an incredible surgeon or you will make an incredible artist. And my daughter faints at the sight of blood, so we went artist. She went to college under art, and she'd never been any formal training. But what happened was they just said, you're just a natural. And she just started drawing things, and it just fulfilled her, and it gave her a purpose. And she now wants to be an art teacher to help other kids who have this innate interior ability. And she can do stuff. It's like, how do you do that? It's like, it's so lifelike. It's so amazing. My other daughter, my youngest daughter, we tested her. And she said, Dad, I think I want to be a marine biologist. And so we had her tested. And she came out with the highest score they've ever scored in the number of ideas that flow through your head. So they said, we've never tested anybody this high. And it says, you're going to be a writer. And she broke down in tears. I don't want to be a writer. I don't want to be a writer. The next 4 were scientists stuff. And what they said was, even if you go into science, you will end up probably writing about it. Because they said, you are off the charts in what they called ideaphoria. Most people have, 2, 5, 10, 15, 20 new ideas every day. She has hundreds. And it's just amazing how it's opening up the world to her. Because she says, I get into a situation, nobody knows what to do, and I have 75 ideas. And so it's just fascinating. So it's helping me parent my kids. So now let's talk about these, okay? These are what they are. They found objective personality, that means you like to work with people, or subjective personality, you like to work by yourself. Graphoria, the ability to move paper and write things. Now, what they've also discovered is many boys are not strong in graphoria. And if you don't have strong graphoria, high school and college are very hard. But it doesn't mean you're not smart. It means you don't have high graphoria, the ability to move paper around, okay? And you're very smart, okay? Then ideaphoria, that's what my daughter tested. It's just the number of ideas you have flow through your head every day. Then structural visualization, the ability to see things dimensionally. How many of you have ever played Tetris? Okay. Now, there is a version of Tetris that is 3-dimensional Tetris. Any of you ever played that? Okay, a few of you. I've tried to play 3-dimensional Tetris where you rotate this thing in space. I cannot picture that in my head. I never get one of the shapes to lock in right. And I lose the game within 5 seconds every time. because I have hardly any structural visualization. If you're going to go into computer-aided design or architecture or whatever else, you need to have high structural visualization. Then inductive reasoning, where you can pull a lot of different things from various places. How many of you ever watched murder mysteries and you always know within 15 minutes who did it? Okay, that means you have high inductive reasoning, okay? If you have analytic reasoning, you like the whole picture and then you like to break it apart and analyze it, okay? Then finger dexterity, where they test how many little things you can move with your fingers. Okay? And then they've discovered that you can have a totally different score when you put tweezers in your hand. That's what they discovered about my daughter, that you put tweezers in her hand and she just went through the roof. She could move all kinds of things that were not true of her using her fingers. And so that's, they said, artist or surgeon. Very interesting, okay? Then observation. Oh, that was the other thing they discovered about my daughter, my middle daughter. She sees everything. She just sees things and can just like picture, memorize things. That's why they said surgeon or artist. She's incredible with an artistic orientation. Design memory. This is the ability to memorize designs. If you're going to go into fashion or you're going to go into architecture, that's very big. The next 4, tonal memory is to remember tones. Pitch discrimination is to remember the difference in pitches or to know those. These are all musical. Rhythmic abilities. Okay, the ability to, the drummer has to know all that kind of stuff. Timbre discrimination. I don't have any of that, and every time I get to that explanation, I don't know what it means. So somebody who knows music can tell me what that means, because I don't even know what it means. Okay, I was first chair in the orchestra I played in at the end of middle school because I memorized this test, and I scored the highest, and but then everybody figured out he doesn't have a clue what he's doing. Because I went from 31st trumpet to first trumpet. And I don't have any of that. So what I would do is I would wait till the second trumpeter would raise his, and I'd go, oh, that's supposed to play. Until finally he challenged me and proved that I was a complete idiot and got me out of that chair because he was really good. Because if you have those abilities, you can be really good with music. I don't have them, so I can't be. I don't get it, okay? Now then, number memory, the ability to memorize numbers. Syllagrams is the ability to learn foreign languages and various kinds of things. And they've discovered, I have a friend of mine, his son, he had him tested, and he just went off the charts with syllagrams. He now knows, he goes to Russia for 3 weeks and he knows Russian. He's in China for 5 weeks and he knows Chinese. Then he went over to Japan and he just picks it. It's like he just soaks it up. It's just amazing, okay? Then foresight, the ability to see ahead, and color perception. Does this make sense? Now, some of the things you're experiencing with your spouse and your kids are because they have these natural abilities and they need to come out. Or what they've discovered is if you do not let a person express and develop this, they get angry and they get frustrated. Because this is who they are. Now, let's go on. Oh, I got all the, you don't need to, okay, you can. There you go. Yeah, this is all the musical stuff. If you have that, you already know, okay. Let me talk about eye memory patterns. This is another weird one. Psychologists have discovered that all of us save and create memories and information, and our eyes tell us where it's coming from. And so that I can look at your eyes and I can ask you questions and I can tell what's happening in your head. It's really weird, but they've done enough. It's called eye memory patterns. Now, there are some people who've used it in a very odd way, and so you have to be careful of that, but it's a very, very powerful process. Now, let me help you understand. There's 3 of them. There's a visual orientation, there is an audio orientation, and there is a feeling orientation. What they've discovered is if you are going to remember a visual memory, like if I were to ask you, what color was your house when you were 5 years of age? Go ahead, think about that. Everyone either looks up and to the right or they defocus because the memory, a visual memory of a color is stored usually up and to the right, where your eyes look up there, or you just defocus and you find it in your head. So if I ask my kids, or if I'm in counseling and I ask you what really happened, and you look up and to the left, you're lying, because you're making it up. But if you're up and to the right, usually, now unless your things are reversed, so you have to kind of ask, what color was your house, and watch which way they look. So you looked left. That's good. So maybe yours is to the left. See? Okay. So that would be good. Now, you have to determine it. Now, then audio, what they've discovered is that when you have an audio memory, you tend to look out to the side, this way or this way. And when you say, talk to me, you'll tend to, almost like the phone, you'll look at your ear, or it's kind of horizontal. And then if you have a feeling, if I say, what was your most embarrassing memory, where does everyone look? They look down, because you store emotional, negative things down. Now, what they've discovered is that not only does everyone do all of those, we all have a preference for one of them. If you have a preference for visual things, then you talk like this. I can see that. Isn't that beautiful? Tell me more about how you see that. And you use visual words. If you're an audio, you say, I hear you, talk to me. Help me understand. You use audio words. If you have feeling memory as your dominant, then you have a tendency to say things like, I can feel you. Oh boy, I can see where that, and you use feeling, and you talk about feelings down here. Now, what's interesting is visual people are the farthest from feeling people. And many times, a visual person is trying to communicate things to a feeling person, and it's missed in translation. Because one's talking feelings, touch, sensation, and feeling things, and one's talking visual things. Audio's in the middle. Now, fascinating enough, my wife and I are both audios, so it works. So sometimes, I used to try this because I discovered it before I was married, and I would go out on dates with young ladies, and I would try and figure out what they were. And I'd memorized all the different kinds of words, and so if I heard a lot of visual things, I'd say, I can see that. Fascinating. Tell me what you see. I was like, whoa, you can really connect. Fascinating. Okay? And now, I also do this in counseling. I remember I was working with a lady, and she was talking to me about how her and her husband were doing, and she went like this. And I very quietly said, what did you see? What did you feel? And what did he say? And it was like I was in her head. She said, how did you know? She said, I saw the skillet that he'd thrown at my head spinning towards me, and I ducked. It smashed against the picture behind me, and I heard it crash, and I just felt like my marriage is over. And then I heard him say as he walked out the door, I hate you. And I discovered I was in her head. I was in there because she told me. She looked up, she looked down, and then she looked out. Now, usually when I get done with this lecture, no one will look me in the eye for the rest of the weekend. But this is a very powerful connection, okay, where you can help a person get through this. Now, okay, there's a lot of other things we could talk about. Oh, that's the one that Jane mentioned, birth order stuff. Pamela mentioned it. Yes, first child, second. I didn't even talk about that. That's a whole other thing. So, now, let me ask you a question. How many of you are willing to talk with your spouse about how they might be different than you? Good. And how many of you might be willing, when you get done with that, to pray a prayer that says, God, thank you for making them different. And the word at the end has to be different, not weird. Okay. And you have to pray together after you say, wow, where are you? Are you this? Are you that? Are you this? Because you just have to celebrate, wow, you're really different. And God gave you to me and me to you. Let's figure this out. Isn't this fascinating? And one of you's going, no, I want them to be just like me. If you are just exactly the same, one of you is unnecessary. Okay? Now, ignoring needs, immature behavior, clashing temperaments. Tomorrow we will cover the fifth one. The fourth one, you may have to go on my website to just listen. But I'm hoping you understand God has given you a treasure in your spouse. And the more you explore them, the more grateful you are. If you haven't done 5 grateful things you're grateful for with your spouse tonight, besides the fact that they get you s'mores or whatever, just tell them, I'm grateful, I'm so excited about this. Let me pray for you. Heavenly Father, I pray that you would allow your people to fall in love with the variety, the diversity, the uniqueness of each other, and begin to see that you have woven their spouse into this wonderful creation. Sure, there's some areas of growth, but you have given them this wonderful, unique person, and they are to celebrate it rather than to be against it. May you bless and encourage us. In Jesus' name, amen.